The United States has never experienced a population decrease, but what goes up eventually must come down, and America is no exception. The US's population is projected to peak at 370 million residents in 2080, and where Americans live in the coming decades will change drastically too. In fact, by 2050, it's estimated that 90% of our population will live in cities, and 60% will live in just 10 states. What will those states be? Find out in... And let's hit 5,000 likes for a video on what the largest countries in 2050 will be. Number 10. Washington. Washington has been one of the fastest growing states for each of the past 33 years, jumping from the 18th most populous with 4.87 million residents in 1990 to the 13th most populous with 8 million today. Why? Well, it's gorgeous, and the Seattle area has had one of the best economies for decades, with its median household income of $102,000 being the third highest of any metro. This, combined with a cost of living that is ridiculously expensive, but still much cheaper than California, where the most new residents come from, has led to Seattle's metro population tripling over the past 40 years to 4.03 million. And the region is predicted to welcome an additional 1.2 million jobs and 1.8 million residents by 2050. But since most of the newcomers are young professionals, many of whom don't plan on having kids, the population will progressively age, leading to a decelerating growth rate. Even so, the state is projected to add 2.4 million residents by 2050, bringing the total population to 10.4 million, catapulting Washington into the top 10 for the first time. Number 9. Illinois. While the US will likely attain its maximum population in 2080, Illinois got the memo a little early and didn't want to wait around, peaking at 12.9 million residents and the 5th most populous state in 2013. And ever since, it's been losing residents for 10 straight years, with the rate at which the population is declining accelerating. A net 104,000 residents left the state in 2022, making it the most moved out of state. And although only wealthier residents usually have the means to move, in Illinois, there's a net outmigration in every income bracket, even those making under $10,000 per year. This is mostly due to the fall of Chicago, whose metro area houses 75% of all Illinoisans. High taxes and crime, terrible traffic and weather, and an ever-increasing cost of living have resulted in it being the most moved out of big cities. But projections show the state's population starting to flatline by 2040 before slowly rising again to an estimated 11.04 million in 2050. Number 8. Ohio. Ohio is perhaps the most misunderstood and disrespected state, because despite not having a single top 30 largest metro, and nearly everyone surmising it is flyover country, it quietly houses the nation's 7th largest population and economy. Now sure, like most of the Midwest, Ohio's population of 11.76 million is shrinking, but by much less than its contemporaries. And if last year's data of over half of total moves in the state being inbound migration is an indication of what's to come, Ohio may soon very well turn things around, especially since the state is still exceptionally cheap and Columbus's diverse job market is expanding rapidly. The government is also implementing incentives to try to convince Ohioans to stay, with $1 billion already invested in infrastructure and broadband expansion to attract new tech companies, and a brand new merit scholarship program which provides $5,000 to the top 5% of students who choose to attend an Ohio university. So even though people are fleeing Cleveland, Akron, Dayton, and Toledo due to high crime and lack of good paying jobs, Ohio's population is projected to remain fairly stagnant, with 11.82 million residents in 2050. Well, that is unless there's a climate refugee crisis, in which case the Great Lakes region would likely experience a huge influx of new residents due to its favorable climate and access to 20% of the world's freshwater. Number 7. Pennsylvania. You might lump Pennsylvania with Illinois as a state which was once incredibly large and influential that has taken a huge fall from grace. And while I can see the parallels between Philadelphia and Chicago, which were both once America's second city, Philadelphia's metro population has actually remained quite steady since people are fleeing the city but moving to the suburbs as there's still good paying jobs. Plus, Pennsylvania has plenty of other prominent cities, whereas Illinois has corn and soy fields. The Keystone State's demographics will shift dramatically over the next 30 years, however, with new data suggesting the amount of under 20-year-olds dropping by hundreds of thousands in the coming decades. But seniors settling in rural areas due to Pennsylvania having many of the best small towns are expected to offset this population loss. And overall, Pennsylvania is expected to grow from 12.97 million in the 5th most populous state today to 13.2 million in 2050. Number 6. Georgia. Georgia's population has more than tripled over the past 70 years, from 3.44 million in 1950 to nearly 11 million today. And while it isn't expected to grow at that insane 3% annual growth rate in the decades to come, the state is still attracting many newcomers, mainly because of Atlanta's exceptional job market. Nearly half of all the new residents said they moved here for a job, and Atlanta's metro population has already doubled in just the past 25 years to 6.24 million. And the Atlanta Regional Commission foresees the region growing by an additional 38% to reach 8.6 million residents by 2050, which would be 17 times the city's metro population of just 500,000 in 1950, making it the nation's 5th largest metro area. And Georgia's population as a whole is projected to increase by 23.4% over the next 27 years to 13.55 million. Number 5. North Carolina. North Carolina has never fallen below the 15th most populous state in any US census. And it's projected to make the greatest jump on this list, from 10.82 million residents in 9th place today to over 14 million residents and 5th place by 2050. All without having a single top 20 largest metro area. That will soon change, however, as Charlotte is expeditiously expanding, with the metro area poised to see a 37.8% population gain from 2.76 million today to 3.8 million by 2050. But the region expected to see the most growth is Raleigh, with its metro population of 1.48 million, projected to add another million new residents by 2050. The reason? Because it's the hub of the Research Triangle, the nation's 4th fastest growing economy and only place in the country with its life sciences reputation, university research capabilities, and cluster of biotech companies. Not to mention a growing number of excellent jobs in agtech, fintech, AI, machine learning, and gaming. The Tar Heel State is also home to many other mid-sized cities expected to see steady growth, since unlike the western Sunbelt states, which are getting hotter and running out of water, North Carolina has a pleasant climate and can still support a lot more people. Number 4. New York. I recently said in my Why 50% of Americans Live in These 9 Overcrowded States video that New York would likely be the 4th most populous state for the rest of our lives. And barring any crazy unforeseen circumstance or drastic world-altering event, it certainly looks to be the case. Because sure, with high taxes and housing costs, leaving New York, especially the city, seems to be the trend, with the state losing over 500,000 residents since 2020. But just like with any trend, it won't last forever. In fact, New York already experienced a population decrease from 2015 until 2018, before gaining over 600,000 new residents from 2018 to 2020. And if you dig a little deeper, many of the New Yorkers who fled due to the pandemic just wanted more space or to live closer to family and didn't leave the area entirely, with New Jersey and Connecticut receiving the plurality. And as the city now no longer has restrictions, more people actually moved into New York City last year than any year in the past decade. Because despite all of its problems, there is no city on earth like New York, and Americans and immigrants will always want to live there. Overall, the NYC metro population is projected to grow by 8.2% to reach 21.15 million by 2050. And although the state won't grow as much due to upstate's aging population, New York State is still estimated to reach 20.83 million residents in 2050. Number 3. Florida. Florida is currently the fastest growing state, with the population of 22.63 million increasing by 1.61% over the past year. And the state is predicted to welcome 300,000 to 400,000 new residents per year for at least the next decade. And while wages throughout the state still have some catching up to do, the cities' economies are starting to diversify, especially in the Tampa Bay region, attracting many young professionals in addition to the retirees who have been coming since the invention of AC. In fact, the Tampa Metro is expected to grow by over 43% from 3.29 million residents today to 4.71 million by 2050. And although Florida will still only be the third most populous state, it's also poised to become the third ever state to hit 30 million residents, with a projected population of 31.19 million in 2050. Well, that is so long as rising ocean levels don't force people to flee, because at nearly 1/3 of all Floridians, Florida has the highest percentage of residents living less than 3 meters above sea level. Now, before we get to the final two, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and come back in 2050 to see which projections were right or wrong. And while it won't be in the top 10 most populous states by 2050, one state whose population is expected to grow dramatically is Arizona, which is currently the 14th most populous state with 7.46 million residents. By 2050, however, the Phoenix metro area alone should have a population greater than 7.5 million. The state as a whole is estimated to have around 10.12 million residents halfway through the century, good for the 12th largest state by population, and on track to make the top 10 by 2100, so long as water and energy concerns with the increasing population are addressed. Pretty good for a state that barely had 300,000 residents a century ago. Number 2. Ba-da-dum! California. 60 years ago, California passed New York to become the most populous state in the nation. And ever since, no state has even come close to catching it. But its run as the largest state by population will likely only last 20 more years. Because despite its beautiful weather and scenery, bustling big cities, and incredibly diverse economy, the cost of living has become astronomically expensive. And many people just can't afford to live here anymore, even if they want to. Similar to New York, however, COVID restrictions and the ability to work from home were big reasons why the population declined by 600,000 residents over the past 3 years to 38.94 million today. And the rate at which California is shrinking is slowing, only decreasing by around 80,000 residents over the past year. Because although the state has been experiencing an exodus with net outbound domestic migration for 20 years, it actually grew for 17 of them due to strong natural increase numbers and large amounts of international immigration. And since immigration numbers are on track to return to pre-COVID levels within a few years, the population should soon stabilize. California is projected to experience a 1.46% population increase over the next 27 years to reach 39.51 million, which is actually lower than the state's peak population of 39.54 million. Number 1. Texas. There's a new sheriff in town, and for the first time in the history of our nation, Texas will be the largest state by population. Because despite already housing 30.74 million residents, it's projected to be the fastest growing state over the next 30 years due to its affordable cost of living, moderate weather, and exceptional economies of its 4 largest cities. By 2050, the Dallas-Fort Worth metro is poised to pass Los Angeles to become the second largest with a population of 14 million. The Houston metro should see around a 33% increase to reach 10.4 million residents, and the Austin and San Antonio metros, which will likely have merged to become one massive metroplex, are expected to add an additional 3 million residents for a total of 8.3 million. Overall, Texas's population in 2050 is estimated to be 45.22 million. But while this means Texas will hold 12.2% of the US population, over 50% of Americans currently live in just 9 states. If you want to find out why, there's a video on screen now. Go check it out.